All right, we're working on this series, Mentally Tough, and I won't go back over too much of the intro here, but it was a book back in the 80s, actually. My dad, I remember when he first did a series on this, the concept behind it is take the principles of winning at sports and apply it to winning at business. And my dad took that and said applied to winning at life, particularly spiritual life. So we're maybe working here? Try this again. There we go. So 1 Corinthians 9, verse 25. The whole context is great, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to hit 25. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Brethren, there are two groups of people. And we can say it different ways, lost and saved. We can say in Christ, out of Christ. Tonight, for this purpose, for this series, I'm going to say there's winners or there are whiners. There are victors or there are victims. And one of the things we got to be real about is our society is training us to be victims. God is training us to be victors. I'm going to go with him. Because on that final day, all of the victims are going to be crying out to the rocks and the hills to fall on them. The victors, God is able to make us stand holy and blameless before him. And I'm looking forward to that day. We are eagerly awaiting his appearing. But along the way, we want to make sure we learn how to win. And so, talking about this, it's not performance that makes you feel great. Sometimes it seems like you do something well and then you feel good. But it's actually the order is the other way around. It's when you feel great that you do great. You have to change your mood first before you can perform well. My dad never did go for this kind of face. Okay? And not, you guys know. Okay? If you try going through a day with this kind of face, you aren't going to do very well. And usually you'll have other people around you that don't do very well either, because people are pretty easy to pull down. So we want to change that mood first. And what's our definition for mental toughness? Anybody remember? Doesn't have to be exact words. What's the concept in this course? Yes, the ability to change your emotional state. That's what we're calling mental toughness. Okay, so to be able to get into the right emotional state so that you can perform as whatever the situation requires. I mentioned this. I'm going to mention it one more time. I like Blythe. We miss Blythe around here. One of the things I remember telling her early on in math class, when you feel good, you do good. And so she would tell me that, when you feel good, you do good. And then one day she's like, when you feel great, you do great. And then somewhere she was like, when you feel awesome, you do awesome. I was like, that's, you guys, I all know Blythe. She always takes it up a notch or two. And it's true. So we want to be those who feel good. So just, again, some stuff we covered last week. The ideal performance state. This is when you are absolutely at your best. And I don't know, guys, maybe, depends on who you are probably, but you might get something like this 5 times in your life. Where everything just goes perfectly. You are such in the zone that like everything is just moving along. So that's not, what we're talking about is not so that you can always be in your ideal performance state. I'll clarify this a little bit more later. But to have opportunities to be there and to always be able to be consistently at your best. The scripture does tell us that we want to make the most of our time because the days are evil. Coping is for beginners. Okay? Some of us are beginners. That's where we start. Okay? Coping is better than quitting. But God wants to take us from those who cope to learn how to win, particularly spiritual. And so, if you continue to do what you've always done, you'll continue to lose when you could have won. There are times in my life, even going through this course, particularly the last time when I did it with the high schoolers here, there were a couple things that jumped out at me. It's like, there's some things I need to do differently, things I need to do better. And I personally, I like it when I find something that's practical that I can grab a hold of and change for the better. And so I want to win. And so I think all of us here, we're here in Christ because we want to win spiritually. And so we're willing to make whatever changes necessary along the way for that to happen. And it's a process, okay? So I had I don't know if I want to say privilege of coaching homeschool sports, but it's very interesting to me. You take a homeschool sports as just an example versus a championship class or AA basketball team, for example. Just take those. I actually coach soccer, so we'll use soccer. One thing I realized with homeschool soccer is that we weren't trying to go from good to great. We were trying to go from bad to okay. And when you're trying to go from bad and work your way up, okay, it requires a lot of encouragement. Okay? A lot of encouragement. When you get from good and you want to be great, there is a next notch up, and now there can be more critical. Like, what do we need to do better? You can be tougher, if you will, on the team. So wherever you're at in this individually, okay, you know where you are. If you need a lot of encouragement, then encourage yourself along the way. Okay? If you're good and you want to be great and there's some spots that you want to be a little bit introspective and tough on yourself, hey, here's some things I need to toughen up and do better, then take that on. Wherever you're at along the way, there will be some good stuff in this course for you. It's not magic. There's three factors: talent, practice, and attitude, and you can't replace talent and practice. Okay? Scripture's clear, even about talent, and we got to be honest in our own selves about what our talents are and figure out in life the way to take the God-given talents that He's given us and to use them effectively for His glory. Anybody can learn anything, but there is what we call aptitude for things, right? So I'll just use me as an example. I could learn to be mechanical. Some of you might scoff at that a little. I'm sure I could learn to be mechanical, but I'm probably never going to be a top-notch mechanic because talent is I don't have an aptitude for that. Okay? So I have to take areas of my strengths and figure out how to use them. So this is not going to replace, like me being in the right emotional state and going and looking at Talia's car when the latest problem happened to it is not going to make me be able to magically fix it. Okay? No matter how good my attitude is or my emotional state. It isn't going to solve the lack of talent and practice in that regard. So what emotional control does is ensures you're realizing your talents, gives you the ability to be at your best when you want or need to. We closed with this last week. Hemingway said, courage is grace under pressure. The world supplies the pressure. And brethren, there's pressure. I was reading Luke chapter 8. I guess that might be some of your guys reading tomorrow, depending on the parable of the sower. But, those different soils, there are pressures that come along. There are afflictions. There are temptations. There are persecutions. There are worries of this life. Pressures are going to be there. Satan will supply them, and God allows those to be applied to us in our lives. Even the Apostle Paul, I take great encouragement from his life. He said, there's the daily pressure on me of concern for all the churches. The Apostle Paul would say there are conflicts without and fears within. He understood pressure. Nobody is exempt from this, but mental toughness, and of course, I'm going to say with God's help, supplies the grace. So what we're going to work on tonight is mood control. Ecclesiastes 9:10, this is one of the verses the kids memorize in their paces. Whatever your hand finds to do with all your might, for there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom or Sheol where you are going. I'm not convinced that Solomon gets everything right in the book of Ecclesiastes, but this is a pretty good way of saying you only get to do this once. So make it count. Make it count. And in my life, I'm getting old, so a song I've always liked, Switchfoot, I want to live it well. You're going to live life, I want to live it well. You're going to do it one time. And something that's really encouraging to me, brethren, is every one of us on that final day, if we are faithful in Christ Jesus, I'll just say it in these terms. There is a Hebrews chapter 11 that has our life recorded. And the only thing that's left in that are the things that we did by faith. I want that to be meaningful. I think it came up in our Philippians class. I was in Nick's class, and you might have mentioned, just maybe in yours, but the Apostle Paul, or talking about in the synagogue, talking about David having served the purpose of God in his generation. And I think Nick's comment was, what better thing could be said about you than that? I want that to be able to be said by God about me. And so make it count. Whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. So maintaining positive energy, we got to have some strategies. There are things that we have to be intentional about. Okay. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but if you don't have a plan, it's really hard to work the plan if you don't have a plan. If you don't have a plan, it's really easy to get run over. Okay. In simple terms, I find this, I guess sometimes a thought that goes in my mind with some young people is they don't run the day runs them. And it's probably true for some of us older people too. Okay? Do we run the day or does the day run us? Well, we won't be intentional, have strategies, and at any given time, bottom line is this, at any given time, you are in one of 4 internal energy states. Okay? Now these internal energy states that are spoken of in here are a simplification of the human nervous system, the emotional and nervous system. Okay, but we're going to make this, and I like it, because energy states are a lot easier for me to understand than the science, the limbic system, all the neurotransmitters, the hormones, all that. It's just, I like the simple concept. We're in one of 4 internal energy states. And so when we learn to recognize those states, we can move from one to another. So the goal of our class tonight is to lay out what these 4 internal energy states are, and then I'll give you a handout at the end. Pay attention throughout the week and see where you're at in them at different times. And so the first part is being able to assess where you're at. So then you can figure out with the tools how to get from one to another. Moving to the proper internal energy state allows us to perform at our best. Anybody see this? Miracle on Ice, 1980 Winter Olympics. U.S. hockey team, Coach Herb Brooks and his boys in winter. I don't know when this was made. I think, wow, my eyes are old. I think this is a Disney movie, if my memory serves me correctly. And I think it's pretty family friendly. They always still sneak something or two in there because that's just the way it is. But pretty older movie. But it's about the hockey team of 1980. And you got to remember, in 1980, what were the Olympic athletes? What did you have to be? Amateur. Now, did the communist bloc countries follow that rule? No. Okay, they were all state-sponsored state. So, if at this point in time, in 1980, okay, Gary, do you remember who was the dominant hockey team during this period of time? In the Olympics. Yeah, Soviets, right? Soviets were dominant for a long stretch. Charlie, were you saying something, Charlie? Sorry, were you? Wow. So these guys were pros, okay? And the U.S. Olympic team is amateurs, okay? They're taking these guys, college players, or recently graduated from college, and it's actually any objective standard, they're going to be blown off the ice in the early rounds. Their coach even said, when asked what their chances were, he said slim and none. They did play the Soviets not too long before the Olympics, just kind of an exhibition, and they got hammered pretty good. So, but along the way, it's interesting. The U.S. beat the Czechs, Norway, Romania, West Germany, and then they went on to face the Soviets in the medal round. Now, we'll say this. This team achieved way beyond what you would think of as their capabilities. For two main reasons, actually. One, I just got to go in passing here. One is the coach didn't pick the best hockey players, he picked the best team, in his words. Okay? And through a bunch of intentional adversity that he put them into situations, their team chemistry was incredible by the end. By the time they came to the Olympics, their team chemistry was great. And I think, this is a great picture of the church, guys. I hate to break the news to you, but the inspired record is there were not many mighty according to the flesh, not many noble. But God chooses the weak things of the world, and he brings us into his body, a team. And so when we can function the way he wants us to, we're unstoppable. Okay, so these guys weren't without adversity. I do want to show you really quick, Mr. Edgar, I'm going to have you play like a 2-minute clip here of this.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Don't know why it's frozen, but...
And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game.
Just close your eyes and listen.
If we played them 10 times, they might win 9. But not this game. Not tonight. Tonight, we skate with them. Tonight, we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can. Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team in the world. You were born to be hockey players. Every one of you. And you were meant to be here tonight. This is your time. Their time is done. It's over. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
Well, the visual wasn't great, but hopefully you caught the gist of it. I think I was talking right when he said 9 times out of 10 they might beat us, but not tonight. And they did go on to beat the Soviets, and then also won. I forget who it was in the championship. What did you say? Finland. Yep, Finland in the championship. And so, but the point of this, he says you're born to be hockey players. You're meant to be here. The moment is yours. This is your time. And because of these guys' positive energy, they were able to go and in that moment be at their best. Be at their absolute best, and the Soviets weren't. And that's how they won. Oh, there we go. Old versus Finland. Okay? And so we want to learn to be able to get ourselves into the right state at the right time. Different kinds of energy. There are 2 ways to feel highly energized. Okay? And anybody want to take a wild guess at those 2 ways? Give me one way that people could be highly energized. It wouldn't be so positive. Rage, right? You ever been there? Highly energized, but in rage? Okay? I have this example of the trip to Football Hall of Fame. I better be quick. My dad was preaching in Ohio. I was out there with him. Jeff Hostetter and I made a trip to Canton, Ohio, and went in there. And they showed us one of the things at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They went into this seating like this, and they showed us locker room footage before games. And I think it was the Steelers, actually, that I was watching. But most of the guys in there the way they were getting motivated was basically listening to music and and football's a very violent sport. But there's a few guys in there. Their way was basically some version of praying. Now, it's interesting because rage is a way to be energized. But you'll never be at your best that way. Okay? There is another way, and that's at your best. You are performing. You're in the zone. You're feeling good. Okay? You can tell. Any sports game, the people that are feeling good about themselves, they're not enraged. They're just clicking at another level against the guys who are enraged. When I was chaplain for the Billings Outlaws football team for a little while. Matthew was a little guy, and he and Caleb would go to some of those games with me. But their coach at the time, I'd get to be in the locker room before, and he only knew one way to motivate. And that was basically try to get them raged. Talk about all the bad stuff that everybody was saying about them and this team and that. So now, a few of the guys on that team, I will say, were figured out how to be motivated positively, but most of them, that's what that team, and they were pretty good. They were semi-pro team. Okay, that's, well, I'll come back to that. Then there's two non-energy states. Anybody give me a positive non-energy state? Denya's like the extreme, sleeping. Yes, okay. I'm not quite going that non-energy, but maybe before when you're chilled, relaxed, sleepy, feeling like that, right? And then there's another non-energy state, and what would that one be? Depressed and withdrawn. Okay. You are down in the dumps. So those are the four types. We are going to call them high positive, high negative, low positive, and low negative. And like I said, these are simplification of the human emotional and nervous system. So the two ways to feel highly energized, angry or at your best. Now, I've known people, they got to step up in the moment and do something, and the only way they know how to motivate themselves is to be angry. Okay? And that's the way it comes across. And, well, there's energy, but it doesn't always have positive effects. There are two factors in this, really. How pleasant or unpleasant you feel. That's the first one. And the other is how intensely you're motivated to do something. So I will say, as we go through this, high positive and low positive is where we want to stay as Christians. The high negative and the low negative are not good places to live. So the high positive, we could say, is energy with no tension. Energetic, lively, stimulated, vigorous, enthusiastic, cooperative. Don't you like it when you're feeling good like that? And when other people are feeling good like that? And you're being a team together? That's great. High negative, you're fearful, you're anxious, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're upset, you're vengeful. There's energy, but there's a lot of tension. So low positive, there's neither energy nor tension. We already mentioned this, relaxed, sleepy, weary, little desire, out of gas, low motivation. And that's actually not a bad place to be, oftentimes. I'll say a little more about that in a second. And then low negative, there's no energy, but there's still lots of tension. You're bored. I never have liked that word, bored. Okay? It's like, well, why don't you have something productive to do? Kids especially, not my favorite word. Uninterested, annoyed, irritated, burned out. And you ever felt any of these things? You don't want to stay there. You don't want to live there. We want to be able to move out of that. And so your emotional state does determine how well you perform, and our mental toughness is our ability to shift from any of those energy states into the one that we want to be in, to change those at will. Most people cannot change their emotional states at will. Most people are subject upon circumstances to change their emotional state. There are even teams that are like that, teams that they don't know how to get themselves into the high positive, but if they catch a few breaks and stuff starts rolling, the momentum, they can grab a hold of it and seize that and find themselves in the high positive. but they can't get themselves there without. All of us individually, I would say, are the same way. You can have a day that things do just go right. Today wasn't one of those days for me. Okay? It was nothing major, but nothing, just little things right from the beginning. Nothing was going quite right. No problem. Okay? But there are some days everything's like, yeah. There were birds all around, chirping, spraying, beautiful. Everything's going smooth. Anybody can find themselves in the high positive. We want to know how to be able to get ourselves into the right ones. Low positive, calm and easygoing. This is the place to be if you're just going through a routine that doesn't demand great intensity. How about something like studying? Okay? You're studying for something. I'm putting this together. Okay? I'm naturally pretty up here, so it's important for me to be able to get into the low energy, the low positive, I should say, so that I can conserve energy for the times I need it. And all of us are that way. You do only have so much. So oftentimes it makes sense to be in the low positive. Maybe if you're doing laundry, okay, it's pretty routine. You don't need to be high positive, like hitting it out of the park. That's going to be the best load of laundry ever. It's like, you don't really have to. You can be but you do want to be in the positive side of things. Chill, relaxed, good attitude, etc. Monitored at school. It would be a little weird if Mr. Hoffman was, throwing paces into you might be like me. But anyways, there's a place. There's a lot of things in life, guys, is what I'm saying. A lot of things in life where low positive is the place you actually want to be. Okay. Low negative, you're uninterested, annoyed, irked, irritated, drained, overwhelmed. This is you at your absolute war. If you have to perform in this, you're not good. You're basic, kind of worthless. Okay? If you ever had to do something when you had the flu and you didn't know how to get yourself into the right energy state or something like that, anybody here? And it's kind of a miserable experience and you showed up, but you didn't show up. Okay? And so that it's oftentimes, you lose your job, somebody loses a job, it's easy to go into low negative. You lose a loved one, it's easy. Like this is just the natural place where the emotions want to go on things like that. The high negative is adrenaline, fight or flight. Okay? And there's a purpose for adrenaline. Okay? I'll come back to that in a second. It's better than either low energy state if you need to get something done. Okay? You're in the high negative, you're boiling with energy, but it goes everywhere. It's not very directed. Okay? If you're a batter, you're swinging at pitches full bore, but they're pitches in the dirt. Okay? You can't get a hold of somebody on the phone, so you're ticked off. You slam it down, and whoever asks you the next question, you let them have it. Okay? It's that kind of scenario. Okay? So there is a place for fight or flight. And it is when the emergency demands instant energy and it doesn't care about the future because there won't be any future unless you can resolve this emergency right now. Okay? So some of us, you hit the icy patch on the road and you get off and you're, okay, adrenaline. Okay, fight or flight kicked in. Okay, there's a reason for that. And there is a time for that. Okay? But you don't want this to be the way you live your life. Any energy is better than none, but it does come at a fearful price. People that live here this is their primary means of energy and motivation, are 3 times as likely to die of heart attack as everybody else. Okay? Oftentimes, type A personality. Well, type A personality, whatever, energized people, if it's the wrong energy, it has a price. Okay? In the day, even, there's a price in the day, and there is a long-term price for being in the high negative. We don't want to live here. And by the way, it's not very Christ-like. Okay? It doesn't help anybody else around us. All right? The high positive is energy without tension, joy in the performance itself. I will clarify one thing. It seems similar to maybe when we're talking about the ideal performance state or white moments we talked about last week, it's similar, but it's not quite the same. And because for white moments, basically everything has to line up. Even the circumstances outside of your control have to line up for everything to go perfectly. Okay, what we want to focus on, the things we can control, I'll hit that in a second. But this is the best level that you can consistently maintain. And in the high positive, listen to this, okay? You're not focusing on the results. You are enjoying the moment. Okay? If I'm in a Bible study with somebody, I'm not sitting there thinking about whether or not they're going to actually be obedient to the gospel. I'm just absolutely enjoying the Bible study. Okay? If, I don't know, Nick, you were in your company as owner, you still do outside sales stuff? Or okay. So sometimes you're meeting up with somebody, going to try to be for TJ to do the job. You can't, in that moment, you can't be worried about the results, whether or not they say yes. You got to just live there, enjoy it, enjoy the interaction, and you making your pitch. You just got to like it when you're in the middle of it. Okay? This is high positive. That's the way you feel. You guys can throw stuff in. I know I'm in a little bit of a hurry, but if you have something that's just burning to say, please feel free to say it. Low negative state, this is like 10% of your potential. And yeah, not much gets done. It is weird because somehow people keep jobs today and staying in the low negative. And because it's, basically a lot of jobs these days are hold up a mirror, and if you breathe and it fogs up, you're hired, right? That's the state that some people are in, okay, what they need. But this is 10% of potential, okay? We don't want to be there. The low positive state is 25% of potential. Like I said, there are times, lots of times in your life, this is the place to be, okay? Julie will probably encourage me sometimes to shift into the low positive because sometimes the high positive, the moment doesn't call for that necessarily, right? The high negative state, 60% of potential. So it is interesting. On that Billings Outlaws football team, they were champions, I think, at the time of that semi-pro league they were in. There were two things that kept these guys from being NFL players. The first was talent. Usually it was lack of size, actually. Guys on this team were just not quite big enough to be NFL players. But the second factor was their inability to control their emotional state. There was one guy in particular, I don't know if I should say his name or not, Matthew, you might remember, a wide receiver who was actually really good. He'd played in the NFL some. This guy was a talented guy, but he could not control his emotional state. He was a superstar for the Billings Outlaws. Okay? But he couldn't make it in the NFL because all he could ever get was 60% of his potential. He wasn't thrilled that a preacher, we don't need no preacher come, around here. And I called him out on it, and we got to be relatively get along. The guy ended up getting arrested for being a drug dealer in Billings a little bit later, and he didn't have the ability to control his emotional state. Okay, so 60% of potential, all he could get. The high positive state, you're at 85 to 90% of your potential. Brother, this is where we can live when we need to. It's what we can consistently maintain. So there are, in the ideal performance state, that's 100% of potential. Like I said, there's a little bit of a difference. The high positive is the gateway to the ideal performance state. Sometimes there are circumstances beyond your control. So there's nobody here with little kids, but when you first have children and your kids are crying all night and keep you awake, you can be in the right emotional state the next day. But this is the 5th night in a row of that. Even in the right emotional state, you're just not going to be clicking as well as if you got a good week's sleep. Okay? There are circumstances that are beyond your control. What the high positive is gets us to get the most out of ourselves all the time. Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. So we want to focus on what we can control. Okay? And this is the interesting thing, it's not events in themselves that cause stress, but responses to them. Most people have that backwards. They automatically think it's the events that stress. It's how we respond to these things. Anybody have anything before I go on to the flat tire example? Matthew?
I guess I feel like I've known people where their outlook on life is very negative, and they get a lot of bad breaks, and they really focus on the bad breaks. And that causes them to make maybe even more bad decisions, more bad breaks, and that's all they can focus on, that's all they can see. And, anyone who's played in any sort of, basketball game or anything knows that when the ref makes a bad call, you notice it. But you don't really notice the calls that go your way necessarily. The law of averages is, it evens out. And I do think, certain people's circumstances in life are much more difficult. But everyone gets bad breaks. Everyone gets good breaks as well. It just depends on if you're in the mental state to take advantage of the good break when it comes your way and actually walk through that door, to take advantage of it. Because if you miss that, you don't know when your next good break might be coming.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll try to bring that up a little bit even in this next example. But yeah, everybody, we get them. It's just if we're in the wrong frame of mind and you get the bad break, it'll run right over the top of you. Okay? Push you under and keep you under. If you're in the right frame of mind, when the good things come, you can take opportunity of those. This is a little bit of a, I don't want to say dumb example, but it's decent. Flat tire example. You go out in the morning to leave for work. If you're like me, you're just wishing you were 2 or 3 minutes earlier, right? And you get out there and flat tire. Okay, can do the spare, right? So you pop open the trunk, go, and it's like, oh, I loaned the spare to my daughter last week, and she's in Great Falls. Whatever your version of that is, okay? Okay, what are you going to do? These kind of things happen in life, don't they? Okay. So what are you going to do? Well, if you are in the low negative, you can't think of a good excuse. So you're like, how do I call and tell? You don't want to tell them, I got a flat tire, I don't have the spare. You're sitting there thinking about all sorts of stuff. And then you're going to worry, if I call, who's going to answer the phone? Are they going to be ticked off? So you sigh, you lean on your car. And finally you just go and make a phone call and you're mumbling and they can't tell you and they just figure you're super sick. Because we're Christians, we'd never lie. Okay, so we aren't going to put that even as an option. All right? That's low negative. Okay? High negative, your friend, we'll change it to friends because you can't be this mad at your daughter. Friend who borrowed your spare isn't home, so you try calling them, right? You slam down the phone, you catch a ride to work, but the whole day you're just basically ripping into anybody that is you're allowed to, okay? Low positive, think, yeah, maybe I should call in, but I really can't. Yeah, I'd like to go for a walk. Maybe I should walk to work, but yeah, it rained last night. I don't know if I really want to go out in this. Long and short of it is your neighbor comes by, honks, you hardly notice him, gives you a ride, and you go and you kind of just go through the motions throughout the day. The high negative, or high positive, is you call in saying you're walking to work. Going to be a little bit late, but I'll be there in time for the meeting. You go over your strategies on the way for your meeting, which goes well, and then here's the breaks, Matthew. Your friend stops by with a spare tire, an apology, and a gift. That last part's kind of funny. But I will say this. In my short 51 years of experience in life, and I do pay attention to these kinds of things, I have found that if I go into the negative energy states, that I get more bad breaks that go against me. They pile up. Okay? If I respond appropriately and say, then the ball does start to bounce your way. Maybe it's what you notice. And so then you are able to seize those opportunities Maybe it's part of God's spiritual laws of what you sow is what you reap. I'm sure it's all intertwined. But it is, a lot of times circumstances will change in response to your energy state. Same flat tire, different responses. The circumstances don't matter as much as the response. There are 400 executives who made it to the top, 400 who fell by the wayside, and the only difference was the way that they handled stress. So, successful executives looked at stressful situations as challenges. Others looked at them as stress. That's okay. I wasn't sure if it was with ours or not, but it doesn't seem. Kinda? Okay. So, I'm glad Mel's having fun. 3 typical reactions to crises. There's tanking. Okay, if I say tanking, what does that mean? If anybody tank ever? What's tanking mean? You basically give up. You throw in the towel. You say you aren't even going to put forth any real effort. And that can be from low negative or low positive. It just shows up a little bit differently. The low negative, you're more like overwhelmed. I can't handle this. And so you no-show. People do this a lot, guys. It's weird. Okay, I know a guy, been in jail, got out of jail, was making some good spiritual progress, and the time of his hearing comes up, and he tanks, and he doesn't show up for his hearing. It's like, okay, so where's he now? Back in jail, because that's the way this works. So might be an extreme, but people do this all the time. They just no-show, whether physically or mentally. There's the low positive tanking is you kind of go through the motions with no investment. And the thing I don't like about this, I find a lot of people do this, and sometimes Christians do this. Low positive, you go through the motions without any real investment, and there's built-in excuses. If you didn't succeed, you have a built-in excuse. And a lot of people like to live there because then they never have to accept either I succeeded or I failed and I got to figure out how to get better to win. It's a cop-out is what it is. And so tanking is not, I want to help us be able to overcome those. Temper is another cop-out, really. It's high negative, temper, hypercritical, cynical, accusatory. Okay? In my life, these are things I've had to fight through is this one. Temper's a cop-out too. What you're saying is, I lost my temper, they pushed my buttons, and blah, 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 instead of dealing with it the right way. Then there's choking, which is another form of high negative, and it's fear. It's fear that you don't have what it takes. So, my typical picture of choking is somebody on the free throw line, game's on the line, hey, you're down by, we want to do this. You're down by 2, we'll say 2, and you got a 1-on-1 free throw. If you hit the first one, you get a second one, you tie it, send the game to overtime. And the 1-on-1, it's like the pressure's so great, the fear's there, and it clanks off the front of the rim. And everybody's like, oh, dog. Okay. What happened? Okay, there was fear that you didn't have what it took, and so you concentrated on the consequences instead of the task. Now, I will say this. Choking is actually, there are some good things about choking. Okay? And I want to emphasize this, actually. It means you care. It is way better than tanking. If you tank, if you give yourself out by tanking, you will never learn to overcome choking. Because you're going to go through it this one some. And you're going to have to learn to overcome it. But choking it's a risk of being in a position that matters. That's actually a very positive thing. And so if in your life sometimes you've choked, recently maybe even, don't beat yourself up. Hey, you were in a position that matters. That's a positive thing. It's a place that you can go and grow from. It's better to choke than to tank. You still care. This is just a quick picture of this. Typically the way people are, stage 1, they tank. Stage 2 is anger. Stage 3 is choke. And stage 4 is a challenge. And winner's response is the challenge. It's a great opportunity. And whenever things come up in your life, there are two ways you can look at them. You can go into the negative side, or you can say, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. What a challenge. It's a great challenge. You look forward to that. And that's the key to becoming mentally tough. In the face of problems, you find yourself investing more positive energy. That's just kind of a recap, so I'm running out of time here. What separates mental toughness from workaholism? Some people can go all in on this stuff. Well, I'll just say this. The main difference is picking your challenges. You can't do it all. That's true. Every one of us got to figure that out in our life. So you're going to choose what things are important to you. When you pick your challenges, though, once you're engaged, be committed to master them. Again, there are certain things that call laundry, whether or not that sock of mine that was turned inside out gets turned right side, that's not the end of the world. It doesn't, there's a level here, okay? I think you understand it. Once you're in the game, though, stay in it. Don't let yourself off the hook. Give it everything you got. So we want to learn to control our energy states regardless of stress, understand how to be at our best, and how to commit ourselves 100% to an effort. Evaluate our performance without making excuses. And I like this, okay? This is important for us Christians. It goes along with what we were hitting in Hebrews 4. God has created an environment where we can be honest before Him. Even when we've fallen short, we can be honest before Him, and we can go there to receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need, okay? When you give it your best, if it didn't work, you don't owe apologies to anyone, especially yourself. One of the things I told the older kid Bible teams this year is if you give it your best, you hold your head high. It doesn't matter if you won or lost. If you gave it your best, you can hold your head high knowing that you worked and you put it on the line. It's when you don't give it your best. It's when you purposely let yourself off the hook. Well, if I would have studied, or if I want to, that's cop-out. Give it your best, and the Lord takes care of the rest. He really does. No tricks here. The high positive enables you to perform at the upper range of your skills. If you don't have the skills, mental toughness won't make you good. We know. I just want to do it well. Mental toughness. I don't have time. Go into the human brain. This is the science side of it. I mentioned this last week. The solution in the scientific community is oftentimes just give drugs to make the chemical balance. There are proven ways, guys, that you can do to bring the chemicals in your system into the right balance. And those are the things we're talking about. Okay, we want to stay on the positive side as much as possible. And I've already mentioned this, low positive, just as important to get there. The first strategy is to be able to recognize how you feel in each of the four energy states, internal energy states. Matthew, can I have you and Jesse just kind of go pass these out? I'm going to keep one of mine, one for me, so I know what I'm talking about. You give those, and Jesse, if you just follow up, give those. Be great, thank you. And I just want to encourage you this week to fill in these handouts. So there's two separate ones. There's extremes of energy states. And this extremes one is high positive, your finest hour. I want you to think basically for these four things, what we talked about, high positive, low positive, high negative, and low negative. Think of it back in times in your life, the high positive, when you were absolutely at your best. Okay? What was that scenario? Write it down how you felt. Okay? Low positive, the most pleasant relaxation. Okay? You were on the beach in Hawaii or something, okay? And just getting along with your spouse perfectly, everything felt great. Just whatever that scenario is. Okay? The high negative, when were you overcome by fear or anger, and what was that like? And then the low negative, when you were most depressed and defeated. Okay. So that's the extremes, and that's just looking back in your life and finding those, and try to be descriptive about that so you remember what it felt like. And then this one is a daily energy monitor. If you want to do multiple days, you'll have to make some copies of this. But I just want to encourage you to different times throughout the day. Maybe when you first get to work. Hey, what are you feeling? Okay? Are you in the high positive, high negative, low positive, or low negative? Okay? Something comes up, your kids are fighting, you got to go in and deal with that. How are you responding to that? Okay? High positive, high negative, low. So different times of the day, what the activity was, and just write those down because it's important for you. We'll never be able to move from one internal energy state to another until we're honest and can assess where we are. Okay? So that's the goal for this week. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Next week, we're going to work on attitude. Okay? There's actually 10 of these, 10 more weeks. Next week's attitude, following week's motivation, visualization, exercise, diet, breath control, humor. Might have to have somebody else teach that one. Ritual, problem solving, and stress. I was practicing. Thank you, Lynn. I was practicing, trying to be funny. Okay. So we know positive attitude is important to God. We'll work on that next week. Attitude, emotion follows thought.